Hello, Ronke. Hello, everybody. Well, good evening, everybody. Welcome to our fourth and last talk. Today, our guest is Ronke Kubenhoven, graduate from our MBA with Tulane University. Ronke is mining engineer from Delft University of Technology at Netherlands, and she started working at SGS Minerals in Chile in 1998, involved in the geometallurgical test work of many of the now major operating sites in Chile, like Collahuasi, Escondida, and Pelambres. She worked for Hatch Engineering Chile in projects in Chile, Peru, Brazil, and South Africa. Later, during her work as independent professional between 2012 and 2018, she focused on geometallurgical consulting, which involves clients such as Anglo American, Antofagasta Minerals, and Minera Vizcayita. In parallel, she took up a part-time position as lecturer of mineral processing at the Universidad Técnica Federico Santa Maria in our country. In 2018, she joined the SMII Chile team as leader of productivity, and since then she has been in charge of research and consulting projects focused on enhanced mine and plant productivity. As you can see, Ronke has a very interesting background in mining, so I really thank her participation in this activity for the MBA students. This evening, she will talk about the impact of technological development and innovation in increasing sustainability in the global mining industry. So, Ronke, thank you very much. Your public is waiting for you.
We're going to start. Thank you, Nicole. I'm going to talk today to you about the impact of technological innovation and technological developments on the sustainability of the mining industry. I'm a mining engineer myself. I have an MBA as well from the University of Chile, what Alejandra just said, so I'm happy to be back. A little bit different than what I once had thought of, but it's pleasant and nice to be able to share my experience with you. I work for the University of Queensland, based in Australia. That is, the university is based in Australia, but I'm based in Chile because I work for the Sustainable Minerals Institute that is located in Santiago. And we work on sustainable productivity for the mining industry. Now, today I'm going to talk about different aspects. Intentionally, there is not an outline because I honestly think that there is no real line when it comes to these issues. It is all somewhat interrelated. So I'm going to talk about, as you can see here, mining, water, energy. I will tell a little bit more about how important the mining industry in Chile is and what are the main characteristics. And I will talk more extensively about sustainability and technology in the future. I'm not going to talk too much about what was done in the past. We will see the results of what was done. Then at the end of the presentation, or better to say the second half, I will focus on what is there in the future that is going to contribute to the sustainability. Next, please. So before we start, I want you to give a sort of a global vision or a better impression of the global setting of what is happening that is relevant for the mining industry. And I like this slide myself very much. It was published by the NASA. It's one of the issues that everybody in the world agrees on, and that is that the world is getting warmer. As you can see from different institutes from all over the world, the specific graph for how the planet Earth is literally warming up is pretty much identical. And the temperatures are going up, as you can see here, and that is a relevant setting that we have to keep in mind when we talk about mining. Next one, please. So what you can see here is related to the previous slide, but now we are looking specifically at the carbon dioxide emissions. And now we're looking at geological timescales. So this is not the last 100 or 200 years, we're talking about the last 800,000 years. And as you can see, there have been ups and downs, which is consistent with the different types of geological ages that our planet has been going through. However, the amount of carbon dioxide that is getting into the atmosphere is rapidly increasing, as you can see here, especially in the last 50 years. 50 years ago, it basically, well, now 70 years ago, it basically reached an all-time maximum, and it's going up. It keeps on going up, and this is what people are talking about, right? The issue of global warming and carbon dioxide emission, and these are the facts. This is what we're dealing with. Next one, please. So to link this somehow a little bit more with mining produces metals. Mining produces more than only metals, but I'm going to focus on the mining sector that produces metals. And demand for certain metals is rapidly increasing as a response to the search for cleaner technologies. And cleaner technologies are defined as those technologies that have low carbon dioxide emissions. And this is not only related to energy production, it is also to production, manufacturing processes, industrial activities in general. And as is stated here, this information is from the World Bank. To satisfy the demand, there will have to be a sustainable increase in the mining of these elements. And specifically, we're looking at lithium, cobalt, graphite, indium, vanadium, and nickel. Copper is much further down on the list, and I'll explain a little later where that comes from. It is related to the fact that copper already is recycled to a significant extent, which is not the case for these other metals. But the demand for mining activity is driven by the need for greener technologies. Next one, please. So here we see an overview quickly of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. I'm not going to get into each one of them because either you know them and then you're familiar with this, or you don't know them yet. And then I hope you just remember that there are 17 of different colors. And I encourage you to look at it into a little bit more of detail. But these are the 17 goals that the United Nations have defined that are key for sustainable development. And this applies to any single activity in the world, industrial, domestic. This is what we need to work on if we want to make the world a more sustainable place. Next one, please. So what we're looking at here is the same 17 Sustainable Development Goals, but they're now organized specifically for the mining industry according to whether they have a positive or a negative impact, and according to whether the impact is indirect, moderately direct, or very direct. So this is something that was set up by the United Nations. And as you can see here, and it will be no surprise, the mining industry, of course, can have a very direct impact, and it's better to say a possibly negative impact on life on land and on the clean water and sanitation. However, the mining industry is also recognized to have a very positive and direct impact on aspects such as economic growth, cleaner technologies, clean energy, and industrial development in general, and also to a significant extent, to a higher quality education, because the mining activity tends to drive higher and good quality education in the countries where it takes place. Next one, please. So that is with respect to the global outlook. Now I'm going to get into several specific aspects, and I'm going to talk about more the general ideas behind some of these aspects. I'm not going to bother you with specific technological process details. So if you were expecting to hear me talking about very high-tech temperature or acidity or whatever type of measurements, well, no, that's not what my talk today is about. I'm keeping it more general. The concept of circular economy is a relevant one, and it's a big one. And I just want to show you through a few examples what circular economy actually is. Circular economy, it has to do with using a product that has reached its end of its lifetime and turn that into something that is useful for another product. So basically, you take something that was thrown away literally by somebody else because it's not useful, and you turn it into something useful. So here a nice example is we see plastic bottles at the ocean shoreline that actually can be used for making jeans, jackets by, in this case, the company G-Star Raw, which has a very interesting product based on not only using the plastics, but also, of course, decontaminating the shorelines by making these new products. Next one. This is another one. I'm pretty sure most of us are familiar with the Timberland shoes, right? So what we're seeing here is that by the time tires from automobiles are beyond their reasonable lifetime for safety reasons, usually, right? They can still be very useful for other industries, such as footwear, because of course the rubber that comes out of these tires can be used to produce the shoes. So a nice example of how something that is basically not of value for one industry turns into something valuable for another industry. Next one, please. Now this one is probably a more common one, and I think it's a nice and very successful example of how circular economy can take place, because if you look at a battery, in certain specific cases, the recyclings of batteries or the circular economy that relates to the use of batteries is very successful. You take a used battery, basically split it up into different parts that it consists of, solids and liquids and plastics and metallics and everything, and then you can pretty much turn that into a new battery. I think in the best case scenario, we're talking about using 99% of the products or the materials in the used battery that can be used into a new battery. So that's a very nice and successful example of how circular economy really works. Next one, please. Now here it becomes a little bit more challenging, because if we talk about circular economy in mining, well, the concept of circular economy is that you have raw material that you're using to produce something, and that you basically can get that material from either a raw material that comes out of the ground or off the crops or off the field, or you could basically recycle it. In the case of mining, there are not enough products in the world from which we can obtain the raw materials that are required to meet the demand. So for mining, for quite a long time, we will have a, I would say, semi-circular economy, because we, of course, can reutilize some of the final products or residues from mining, but we would still have to incur into using new materials from new mines in order to meet with the demand as is expected. Next one, please. Now we're changing to a slightly different subject, related, but slightly different. We're talking about life cycle assessment here. Now, life cycle assessment turns around one specific product. So life cycle assessment turns around or looks at a specific product like a television or a computer or a bicycle. And basically what you look at when you talk about life cycle assessment is what is required for that specific product to end up in your hands and what happens with it afterwards once you're done with it. So you're talking about where do the resources come from, how are those materials processed, what does the product manufacturing process looks like, and then what happens to the distribution. It's a highly commented issue, right? The distribution and the supply chain in these modern pandemic times where we depend a lot on distribution and deliveries. Then the utilization itself, and then the end of life, and then back into how we can turn it into a resource for another product. Next one, please. So I thought it would be nice to start with this one. I understand that the majority of the audience today is either doing an MBA or probably has done an MBA or might be interested in doing an MBA. So that makes you a candidate for driving the Tesla rather soon. And it's interesting to look at electric vehicles in general. I just put up the Tesla because it's a really nice vehicle, I admit. And look about what does an electric vehicle actually look like from a lifetime assessment point of view. Next one, please. So in this specific case, we do the lifetime assessment. We express the lifetime impact of this specific product, electric car in this case, as the carbon dioxide emission. And we're doing that assuming that you will be driving this car for almost 137,000 miles, and that we're talking about a mid-sized car, a decent car, yeah, not a real big one. And then we can compare what would be the total carbon emission associated to that car if it would be electric or if it would be based on gasoline. And as you can see here, there's no big surprise. At the bottom, you see the gasoline car, and you can see in the lightest color that relates to the vehicle use. Of course, there's a lot of carbon dioxide emission associated to a gasoline car while you use it because you're burning fossil fuels to get your car going. Of course, that category does not exist for an electric car because with an electric car you use electricity. You don't emit anything while you're actually driving the car. However, the actual battery manufacturing of an electric car, the maintenance that is required, the end-of-life recovery, that means the recycling of the components of an electric car, and the actual fuel production, so the energy that you're basically getting into your electric car, has, of course, a associated carbon dioxide emission. And as you can see, an electric car might not be as attractive as you might have thought, because actually, if you would use a standard electric mix and not 100% green energy, so not 100% renewable, but if you would use gray electricity, as it's also called, you actually wouldn't be contaminating that much less, and that is assuming that you are going to drive 137,000 miles with your car and that it's a mid-sized car. If you would change your car way before that, or you would like a bigger car, then this balance would work out differently. So it's not about only what the electricity is or what the carbon dioxide emission is when you use a car. It is the whole life cycle that you have to look at. Next one, please. I will go through another few examples, and then we will look at more about how this all relates with mining, right? This is a smartphone life cycle assessment. As you can see here, again, there are very many aspects that you have to consider. One of the aspects is talking about carbon dioxide emission. You can also talk about ozone depletion potential. You can talk about human toxicity cancer potential. You can talk about water consumption. Basically, what I show here is if you look at the smartphone, and if you look in purple, the graphs and the bars on the right-hand side indicate what amounts of all the environmental impact is related to the actual utilization and what is related to either getting the raw materials, so we're talking about the mining process, and what is related to the production. And as you can see, the largest impact with respect to carbon dioxide emission comes from the actual production. It doesn't have to do with the mining that provides the raw materials, and it doesn't have to do with the utilization either. And that is, look at this, if you have a lifetime of 3 years and a battery that you charge only every 2 days. Well, I assume that many of us, myself included, does not charge the cell phone only once every 2 days, right? So it's another example of how to look at a product from a life cycle point of view and not just from a user point of view. Next one, please. So just to make a nice gesture to my American colleagues here, I'm European, so we like to make jokes about Americans, right? And this is a life cycle assessment of a American human being. These numbers are from a few years ago. As you can see here, this is the amount of metals or materials that every American born will need in his average life. And it's nice to see how much you actually will need. And this is an average American. Of course, you would think that maybe human beings from lesser developed economies could use less. But still, it's an impressive amount. We're talking about almost, it says here, 971 pounds of copper in a lifetime. I thought this was another nice one. We're talking about almost 7 million cubic feet of natural gas. We're talking about almost 25,000 pounds of iron ore. So there's quite a lot of mining products that goes into a human being. Next one, please. Now, again, getting a little bit more back to mining. If we talk about the life cycle of copper, it's a little bit difficult to talk about the life cycle of copper because, of course, you would have to look at the life cycle of a copper product. So you would have to look at the life cycle of a cable or of a light bulb or copper on itself is not a product. Copper is a raw material. So what you see here, what I said before, of course, copper comes out of recycling. However, mining is still a significant provider. Raw materials mining is still a significant provider of raw material that goes into refining and then into semi-fabrication, product manufacturing, and utilization. And then, of course, the utilization stage finalizes with recycling, and that is then complemented by raw materials from new mining. Next one, please. So now we're going to talk a little bit more about Chile. Probably half of the audience, or maybe 2/3, is more familiar with this than our colleagues from the United States who are present today. But this is about different aspects of Chile as a mining country. So Chile is the largest copper producing country in the world. The numbers are way too small here, but you will have to believe me if I say that Peru is the second on the list of copper producing countries. Afterwards comes China, then United States, and then Australia on a 5th position. Next one, please. When we look at the largest copper mine by reserve, and by reserve we mean the mine of which we know there's still a lot of copper left to be mined, and that is economically attractive. That largest copper mine by reserve is Escondida, which is located in Chile, owned by BHP. Next one, please. About the largest copper company in the world, largest copper mining company, well, maybe no big surprise, that is Codelco. And it's not so much about Codelco that is the largest one. As you can see here on this list, these are the 10 largest copper mining companies in the world. The large majority is present in Chile. I think the interesting one is number 10, Norilsk Nickel, that happens to produce cobalt as a byproduct to such an extent that it actually ends up as number 10 on the list of copper companies as well. Next one, please. Now, beyond copper, Chile also has the largest lithium reserves in the world. Lithium is a very important component as well of green technologies. After Chile, as the biggest lithium producing country, comes Australia, Argentina, and China, and then United States and Zimbabwe. Next one, please. Chile is also the second largest molybdenum producer in the world. As you can see on this top 10 list, China is number 1, United States is number 3, Peru is number 4. And you might see by now that some of these countries, they sort of start repeating, right? That is because of geological reasons, that certain countries in the world have a more significant abundance of raw materials that are attractive for mining. And that is why some of these countries show up on more than one of these rankings. Next one, please. Yeah, there we go. Now, just in case you don't know, I just want to quickly mention, of course, the use for all these metals. Well, it's quite a diversity. A lot has to do with electricity, hence with green technologies. It has to do with transport, with communications. On the top right-hand side, you see some of the rare earth elements that are really critical in many of the most recent technical developments. On the smartphone, on the left-hand side, you see the most relevant minerals that get into a smartphone. We're talking about gold, lithium, aluminium, cobalt, copper, lead, nickel, plastic, silver, and zinc. So there are quite a lot of metals that are required to make our normal consumer goods work. Next one, please. So now we're going to talk a little bit about the economic importance of mining for Chile. And that explains also about some of the technological developments that have taken place in the last 10, 20 years in Chile. But first, some economic numbers. What are we talking about? So what you're looking at here in red is the total copper production of Chile in the world. The yellow is the rest of the world when it comes to copper production. That's all related to the y-axis on the left-hand side of the graph. The copper price, as you can see, is marked in purple on the right-hand side. The reason why I included it here is that, as you can see, the world production of copper and Chile's production of copper is not related really to the copper price. I mean, it's driven by demand and that's it. So the copper price has not a major impact on the demand for copper. Next one, please. Now, when we look at how important the Chilean mining industry is, we can look at the gross domestic product, right? We can look at the contribution of the mining industry to the gross domestic product. And as you can see here, and I was surprised myself when I saw the numbers, and then at the same time they make a lot of sense, it is not that significant. Nowadays, we're talking about last year, 2019, the total contribution of the mining industry to Chile's gross domestic product is about 9%, and it came down from maybe 16%, okay? All the other industries are way more important. Now, that is good news from an economic point of view, because it means that Chile is much less sensitive to variations in the copper industry or in the mining industry, and that makes Chile, of course, because of having a more diversified economy, not as diversified as it could be, but more diversified than it was, say, 50 years ago, makes it less dependent on the mining industry. And this also explains why maybe the mining industry is a little bit less important than mining engineers like to think. Mining engineers like to think that really Chile would be in big trouble if it wouldn't be for the mining. Well, maybe that's not really the case, not anymore. That's what I see from this figure here. Next one, please. Now, when we look at exports, then yes, of course, Chile exports a lot of copper. It exports a large majority of the copper that is being produced. And that is why, from an export point of view, Chile is important. So from a monetary point of view, if you look at the amount of dollars we get into Chile because of the mining exports, then yes, that is, of course, important. We're talking about 56% in the year 2018. And basically, the contribution of mining to the total export numbers, that, of course, is related to the copper price, because the export numbers literally depend on how much you get for every pound or ton of copper, right? So this is something to keep in mind, that yes, it is important from an export point of view. And I like to say, on the basis of this graph, that maybe Chile as a mining country is more important to the rest of the world than it is for its own population, because the contribution to the GDP was relatively small. And if you see how much is exported to the rest of the world, then from the material point of view, raw material point of view, of course, Chile is very important. Next one, please. So now we're going to talk about water, and we're going to talk about energy. And as I said, I'm not going to get into the actual details of what was done in the mining industry to be responsible with water and to be responsible with energy, because I think the mining industry is going the right way. But I want to show you the results, because they are much more interesting than looking at the technical details of what was done. And then when we start talking about the future, I will show you some more technical aspects of what might be coming. Next slide, please. So the way to look at the water consumption in mining, of course, is related to how much continental water is being used. And in this specific graph, we're looking at how much continental water is used per ton of ore. And a ton of ore is basically the unit of ore that comes out of the mine. So in the year 2012, you should, for simplicity reasons, can add up the concentration in the hydromet lines. That is a specific technical denomination within the mining. In the year 2012, we were using 0.7 cubic meters of water for every ton of ore that was coming out of a mine. And in the year 2018, so 6 years later, we are using less than 0.5. And that is basically a decrease, significant decrease, a decrease of almost 30%. So that means that nowadays mining is using less and less continental water. Continental water, just to make sure there's no confusion, is what is available fresh water on the continent, not seawater, continental water. Next one, please. Again, some of us might know, others might be surprised. This is a nice press release, not in the least because of the source where it comes from, nostalgica.cl. This is talking about Tocopilla. Tocopilla is a city in the north of Chile, and that will be using 100% water from seawater, desal water, as we call it. This is rather recent. This publication was from last week only, 7th of October. And that is something that's good. That's something to be proud of, that we have a city that will be fully dependent on seawater, which is a good thing because there is a lot of seawater. So that's a good water source to be dependent on. Next one, please. Now here, if we compare in the mining industry, use of continental water and the use of seawater, there's another way in which you could express the water consumption, and that is, of course, looking at cubic meters per second. So now we're talking about actual volume. And what you can see here is that the total amount that is used of water is going up from basically, this is now the projection we're talking about, from 17 to basically 24 cubic meter per second. However, an ever increasing amount of, or portion, better to say, is from seawater, and we're going to use less and less that comes from continental water. And that has to do with the changing technologies. Nowadays, mining operations are more and more capable of using seawater and making these processes work. And as a result of that, we are using less and less continental water. It also has to do with internal water recycling at the mine sites, of course. Next one, please. So now we're going to talk about energy. Energy is I don't know. Sometimes I think that in Chile, the whole water issue gets way more attention than I wouldn't say it should be getting, but it gets way more attention than the energy subject. And energy actually is, as far as I see, the major issue here on the long term. So you will see it later on in some numbers. But energy in Chile, we have a lot of hydroelectric energy. We have snow in the mountains. We have a lot of sun. Yes, there are a lot of renewable energy sources in Chile. Next one, please. We're looking here at general. This is not just the mining industry. 85% of the world's energy supply is from fossil fuels. However, in Chile, only 74% of the energy supply comes from fossil fuels. And that is significant. That 11% difference is significant. Next one, please. So 95% of the power plants that are currently being developed in Chile are from renewable sources. And as it says here, that is without any subsidies, except the endowment of massive sunshine, wind and water. Well, I would question the amount of wind in Chile. I'm Dutch myself, and I think in the Netherlands we know a little bit more about wind in Chile because of the simple fact that the wind here is typical something that happens in the afternoon, and that's about it. But of course, with the massive sunshine and the amount of water that is available, a lot of renewable energy sources can be used and are already being used. Next one, please. So what will happen in the near future, we're talking about year 2023, about 45% of the total energy consumption in Chile will be from green sources. So we are going to increase rather rapidly. And as we saw in the first slides a few seconds ago, I mean, We were talking about that Chile has about 74% total renewable. We actually are going up to, the 74% was from the fossil fuels. That is going to go even further down with respect to the total energy consumption from greener sources. Next one, please. Now, that was with respect to mining. If we look here at specific companies, just some quick announcement. BHP is switching to green power for their Chilean copper operations in 2021. Next one, please. Antofagasta Minerals, also a big player in the market, meets almost a quarter of its current power need with renewable energy, which is, again, significant. Next one, please. Enel, a big energy group in Chile, signs with Anglo American in Chile, with Anglo's group in Chile, the largest renewable energy supply deal. Interesting information about what several companies are doing, right? Next one, please. Antucoya, it's an operation owned by Antofagasta Minerals that will be operating on 100% renewable energy. It's not an exceptionally large operation, I have to say that, but it's not a minor player either. It's an interesting development. Next one, please. Okay, so now we're going to zoom out a little bit, and we're going to look at some data from the OECD, and specifically interesting document that was published. I recommend you to look at it if you have a chance, the Global Materials Resources Outlook up till 2060. And just highlight some of the main conclusions of this report. As you can see here, the production and consumptions of raw materials is shifting towards emerging and developing economies that on average have a higher materials intensity. So that to some extent explains in simple terms that as the world keeps on developing, the material intensity utilization will go up a little bit. Now, technological developments are required and will help, because we already are working on that, to decouple the growth in production and the material input from production. Okay, so basically what we want to, of course, there will be more demand, but we would like the technology to be smarter and come to a point where we can produce more with less, right? Recycling in that context is becoming more competitive, and that means that we are going to supply more and more raw materials from recycling. However, the primary mining resources will still be necessary. Metals extraction and the use of it, of course, have a wide range of polluting consequences. Yeah, we're talking about toxic effects on humans and on ecosystems. There is no reason to say or to pretend that that is not the case. However, any industrial activity will have an environmental impact. I'm not aware of any industrial activity that actually has no environmental impact. So it's a matter of recognizing what the impact is and how that has to be dealt with. And we'll look at it a little bit later. What's also known is that the extraction and the use of primary raw materials is much more polluting than secondary recycled materials. So that definitely will drive the recycling industry that should take over at some point from the primary materials industry. Next one, please. So here's some developments that are coming, and now we're going to look at just some images so you get a feeling of what it's looking like. One of the big developments in mining, and it's a type of topic that many mining companies are talking about, and it's progressing, it's moving forward, it's not going that fast. We're talking about in situ leaching. Now, I won't bother you with all the technicalities, but basically in situ leaching means that you don't take the ore out of the ground, so there's no open pit mine, there's no underground mine. You basically dissolve the elements that you're interested in, the metals that you're interested in, at the place where they are, and then you pump it up. And then what you see, literally, instead of the typical mine site landscape with literally a hole in the ground, right? You would see something like you see on the right-hand side, where you have this is a uranium production site, where uranium is dissolved in the underground, and it's brought up by pumps. It's put into solution, and it's brought up. And that is everything. This is everything you see. This is an industrial uranium production site that, of course, is used for, in this case, nuclear energy. Next one, please. Now, this is one, and I intentionally mention it because I'm very much aware of the fact that there is a lot of environmental discussion around this, and it's important to recognize that, and it's important to present this as an option while saying that there are environmental aspects that have to be worked on. But what we're looking here at is deep sea mining. So basically you go to off the continental territories, we get into the oceans, and on the bottom of the oceans, at certain places in the world, you would see this type of images where you literally find nodules or those type of rocks, you could say, on the bottom of the ocean that are very rich in certain elements, specifically nickel, cobalt, lead, lithium nodules are well known as well, lead, zinc. You're talking about 7, 8, 9% grade in these specific materials. So that is quite significant, much more than you would see at continental sites. And this is something that will be developing. It is not something that is actually at production scale, but it will keep moving forward, and it will be a major challenge, and it is definitely a responsibility that is recognized how to do this the most sustainable or environmental way as an alternative to continental mining. Next one, please. Now, since we're talking about future and unbelievable things, I just thought it would be nice to put this one in. I'm not sure if you've ever heard about moon mining. Well, it does exist. There are, I would say, prestigious, well-known institutions in the world that are using, that are working on this. Some of them are in the United States. Russia is working on this as well. I know in Europe, Royal School of Mines in London is working on this as well. There probably are a few more. What we're talking about is not so much mining materials from the moon and then bringing it back to Earth, but we're talking about using the moon as the base station for exploring the rest of the universe. Why would you bring materials from the Earth to the moon and then from there on explore the universe? If you could actually obtain those materials at the moon itself, you would save yourself a big step because of the gravity that is involved in moving stuff from the Earth to the moon, right? So there are many opinions on this. Sustainability in the universe is also an issue. And I just wanted to mention it because it is existent and there is a lot of research going on in this area. Next one, please. So now we're going back to Earth and we're looking at the digital transformation of mining. Now this is something that is very relevant and of course has gone through a tremendous recent development because of the pandemic. Basically what this means is you can control any mine site, you can control any industrial operation from anywhere as long as you have good communication technology. And that means that you could have control centers centralized. I'm not sure if any of you has ever been in Perth in Australia. If you come from the airport in Perth and you go to the city, you literally pass by the Rio Tinto centralized control operation that is located in Perth and that controls all the mining activities of Rio Tinto in Australia. So this is something that exists. It's used in some Chilean sites. It is implemented at a slightly less ambitious level, I would say. You would find the control room right next to the entrance gate, and the mine would be 20, 30, or 50 kilometers away from that entrance gate. But this is something that is ongoing, and it's a stayer, and it works, and there is no question about this one. Next one, please. Something more specific, just to mention it, as some of you might have heard, in some cases copper minerals are associated to arsenic, and then the actual pollution or contamination aspect, and this is especially the case in the second region, close to Calama, there are a lot of high arsenic copper ore bodies. The pollution is related to the arsenic and not so much to the copper itself. So the world is looking for technologies that would allow you to process copper ore that contains a lot of arsenic in such a way that you could recover the copper and do not release at all any arsenic into the environment. It doesn't only limit to arsenic, it has to do with lead as well, it has to do with zinc as well, antimony, mercury. Those are the typical pollutants in the second region that you could find in Chile, that you can find it in copper ore. And one of the options is to process these type of ores at high temperature and high pressure in these vessels that you see on the left-hand side. They are capital intensive and they are environmentally extremely friendly. And technically they work very well, but they're expensive. Next one, please. Now, about the tailings, of course, you can't talk about mining, you can't talk about sustainability without talking about the tailings. And I'm pretty sure that all of you will have heard about this major disaster last year in Brazil, at Brumadinho, where the tailings dam collapsed. It was a terrible accident. It literally put the mining industry upside down. There are some developments, and I want to mention just two here, that sort of recognize that having a tailings dam is a liability, it is a risk, it is something that should be avoided, but it's not that easy. What you see here on the left-hand side is the tailings of a mining site, which is basically a slurry. It's a slurry that consists of water and a lot of material of which the copper has been removed, can be filtered. And that means that if you would literally stack it, it's called dry stacking, you would not have a risk of tailings collapse. If you would have an earthquake, there wouldn't be any issues with liquefaction, which actually explained the collapse in Brazil. You could also turn it into bricks. There are initiatives that point into that direction. However, the amount of tailings that come out of the mining industry is so significant that if you would turn it all into bricks, well, you wouldn't have enough space in Chile, which is a country that is 4,000 kilometers long, to use all those bricks to build houses, because there is so much tailings. So I think a real good option would be to put those tailings back to where they came from, right? If you have an open pit mine, if you have an underground mine, at the end of the day, that might be a good option. But that requires moving the tailings, and that involves energy, and that costs money. Next one, please. So the recycling of copper, just to give it as an example, we have gone through different aspects. The recycling of copper is some of the issues, some of the aspects that is really going very well. In the case of the European Union, on the left and right-hand side, you can see that 50% of the copper is currently being recycled. So 50% of the copper utilization in the European Union comes from recycled copper. And the energy utilization or energy efficiency when it comes to recycling is 85% with respect to what it is. So it uses 85% less energy than it would use if you would take it from a raw material. So that is very positive and very significant. Next one, please. Now this is the slide that tries to summarize everything, and I'm about to finalize the presentation because we're already about 45 minutes along now, about the technological development and the innovation. When you look at it from a technological point of view, as I always say, technology works. Really, it works. There is nothing that would have, from a technological point of view, that could have a major impact on making things work. So we know how to do it. The technology is there. What doesn't work that easily is the economy behind it. And the economy behind it has different aspects. One of them, because energy is required. Energy nowadays is expensive in Chile, but energy is also expensive in the rest of the world. And I give as an example that we also have water scarcity, right? It's not only in Chile. It happens in Australia. It happens in Europe, in Spain, in Italy, in Greece. There are different parts of the world that are significantly suffering water scarcity and global heating. Now, there's a reason why the planet Earth is called the blue planet, because there is a lot of water. There is a lot of seawater. If energy would be cheap, we could treat a lot of that seawater with an insignificant impact on the sea levels, and we could produce all the water we need for every possible use we want to give it. However, that's not possible because the energy is still very expensive. And then even if we would have cheap energy, still the energy generation and the mining activity itself will have to be sustainable to assure financial attractiveness for investors. Because investors nowadays look for sustainable investments. Investors do not want to be associated to questionable practices, to polluting industries. And sustainability uses, in that context, more money on the short term, and it, of course, pays off in the longer term. And then I think an unfortunate but a very practical example of why sustainability costs more money. Well, think about your cell phone. If you throw it away in your garbage, it doesn't cost you any money to literally throw it away in your garbage. If you would bring it back to the store, you would have to get into your car. You would use energy to get the car moving. You would have to pay for the parking. You go to the store, you hand over your cell phone, and you get a new one. Why would you do all that if you can do that from your house? And right? So there's a lot of legislation that comes to this, and there is a lot of challenges that have to do with how to adequately address sustainability so that sustainability, even on the shorter term, does not cost any money. And that is something that is important, and that goes way beyond the technical challenges in mining. Next one, please. Now, if you would want to remember one single slide of this presentation, I would suggest you it is this one. If you have seen this expression before, I think you will agree with me. If you haven't seen it before, make sure that this is the one you remember. Sustainable development is defined as the development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. This is a very good definition that came up in 1987. By then it was defined by the World Commission on Environment and Development. It is completely valid now, and it will be valid for a long time to go. So please keep this in mind. Next one, please. To finalize, I think that the future is already there. It's a quote that comes from the year 2003. That's not my words, but the future is unevenly distributed as we are speaking now. Next one, please. Thank you very much for your attention, and I'm very happy to take some questions and comment on some specific aspects if you would like me to do so. Thank you very much.
Ramkes, thank you for your complete and interesting talk. We have here some questions. Omar Gonzalez has two questions for you. The first one he wrote at the beginning of your talk, so maybe of the first thing. He's asking, is there a certain general percentage of waste that you are trying to reduce to?
Sorry, I didn't hear that well. Can you repeat it, Alejandra?
Is there a certain general percentage of waste that you are trying to reduce to?
Okay, I don't really understand the question, to be honest. It says a certain percentage of waste.
I'm going to send you by the chat if you want. If you want to see it. Maybe it's more easy. And
here we go.
It's writing again.
I see it. Is there a certain general percentage of waste that you're trying to reduce to, as shown in your semicircular graph? Wow. Well, that depends on the mining site. It depends on the location. I can comment that, for example, BHP at the moment is going through an open innovation program. It's called the Tailings Challenge. They want to reduce to zero tailings, basically. So they want to reutilize or repurpose 100% of what comes out of the mining process. I think in order to achieve great things, you have to be ambitious, but it seems a little bit beyond realistic at this point. However, there are certain smaller operations that would make that much more feasible. So from an economic point of view, from an economy of scale point of view, you would like to have the mining operations to be as large as possible. And then being economically circular is very difficult, whereas if you would have a small operation, it would be way easier to have a complete circular economy. But then from an economy of scale point of view, you wouldn't have a good business. So there is no one answer. it goes beyond, I don't know, it goes between, right now it's pretty much 0 to 5% what is being repurposed. So that's not an awful lot. It has to be brought up till 20, 30, or 40% at least. But I think we are far away from getting above 50%.
Thank you. Oman has another question. He told us, I have heard in our course before that Chile needs more cash. What are your thoughts on Chile essentially trading assets for money instead of creating technology to develop the raw materials into things such as copper wire instead of raw copper?
Okay, you're asking me very difficult and long questions, Alejandra. I want to pass this on to José Gregorio. I think he would answer it way better than I do. If you write it down for me, because it's just too long. It's too difficult to
okay. I'm going to put in the chat.
I have heard in our course. I've heard in our course before that Chile needs more cash. What are your thoughts on Chile essentially trading assets for money instead of creating technology to develop the raw materials into things such as copper wire instead of raw copper? Yeah. Okay, so there's a mixture of things in here. There are some clear economic aspects that really I'm not the person to respond on. It is true that basically what I take from this is that Chile is sometimes criticized for the fact that we only export the raw material and we don't do anything with it. If you think about it, a copper concentrate contains at most 30% copper and the other 70% is worth nothing. And we're shipping it to all over the world and we're paying for the shipping costs of something of which 70% has no value. So yes, I agree. It would make a lot of sense. There are other voices in the world that say that you would better convert these materials into a more advanced product at close to where your end user is. So there is no one answer. Again, it's a very economic question, and Chile definitely has the capacity to do what you're proposing here. Chile is talking about producing batteries for electric cars because we have lithium and there is quite a nice amount of cobalt in Chile, which are the two main ingredients for batteries for electric vehicles. But again, that's not a technological issue. That is an economic decision. That is a political decision. That goes way beyond the technological aspects. I see here another one. Can I take that one? How did COVID affect the copper industry in Chile, positively or negatively, considering copper is one of the world's most effective virus-killing materials? Wow. Well, I would love to say that it demonstrated that copper kills the COVID. Then we would have a much better life. But I'm not so sure how easy that is. Okay, so a few quick answers on this one. The copper industry in Chile is doing very well. Responded in a very responsible way to the COVID pandemic, and the production has been ongoing, of course, with some effect, but not that significant. So that I would say on the short term, the effect was negative because mining companies have a slightly lower production level. However, the longer term value is incredible because we have been forced to work out of our office, in the city, at home, and do a lot of things that normally, I mean, people would get on a plane and go for a 2-hour meeting to Antofagasta from Santiago. Or people would go to London from one day from Santiago because there's an important meeting in London. Come on, that's not necessary. You just connect to your screen and you have your meeting. So there are a lot of good things that came out of it. I don't dare to give you the balance. I think from a technological point of view, there is no impact. From a production point of view, the impact is slightly negative on the longer term. There are a lot of developments that speeded up thanks to COVID. So it's not all that bad when it comes to mining. Here's another one that says, in circular economy, which raw material at the end of its life has the highest reuse for producing other products? Well, right now I'm pretty sure that it's copper, but I may be biased by what happens in the European Union. I don't have any expert whom I can ask right now. At least copper is a very attractive one. I think gold has a very high recycling. Gold is a different story because gold is used in its pure form. So recycling of gold is just basically collecting it and melting it again and turning it into something else. But it's not something that you have to dismantle, right? So I know of gold that there's a lot of gold going on in the world that is not from the gold mines. And of course, because of all the gold stocks that the big banks of the world have. Those two I'm positive about. I wouldn't be too sure if there are that many others, to be honest. There must be more questions. Yep, there we go. What are your thoughts on predictions from McKinsey and others that energy growth and GDP are slowly but decoupling on a world scale as well? I assume you're talking about energy consumption and GDP. And yes, they better be decoupling. Otherwise, we are in serious trouble. I mean, we should be able to assure economic growth, expressed as, in this case, GDP, right, by being more sustainable. And that means being using more greener technologies that on itself need more raw materials, because green energy, green technology need a lot of metals. That hasn't changed. The question is, where do those metals come from? Do they come from a mine site or do they come from an existing product? So I agree with McKinsey and the others that yes, the energy consumption will be decoupling. I think on the longer term, we are going to see major breakthroughs when it comes to energy production. Hey, so there are various futuristic ideas about using different types of energy level at literally out of the universe that could be a real game changer. But in the next 10, 20 years, yes, I'm pretty sure that if you see what Europe and the United States contaminated while they were getting up to their current level of economic development, and how now other, like say, second world countries are going behind that, then already you see that less energy is used or lesser carbon dioxide emissions are necessary to reach a similar level of economic growth. So we are going the right way.
We have a question from Rachel. What is an example of innovation that has happened in the last year other than remote operation of mines?
Sorry, again, I hear you very
bad.
Yeah, yeah, sorry, echo.
From Rachel Southard. What is an example of innovation that has happened in the last year other than remote operation of mines?
Yeah, I work a lot in digital transformation. I'm completely biased by the role of digital transformation. I'm having some background noise from somebody else. If you can, yeah, thank you. Okay, so digital transformation is definitely one of the biggest ones. Okay, let's put it this way. I think there has been organizational innovation. I think that companies sorry, I'm getting a lot of noise from the other Eventos Postgrado Organizador. I'm not sure if somebody can turn off the microphone there. Yes, I'm being picked up. Okay. A lot of changes have been unscheduled in the sense that I think there have been a lot of organizational changes. And I know of, I remember a month after we were, so there's complete innovation on how we do business. I remember a month after we started with the pandemic and the lockdown in Chile, I spoke to many mine managers that said when they had these severe restrictions on lockdown and not allowing people to go to site, everybody thought like, okay, our production is going to fall back to half of what it used to be. This is going to be the biggest nightmare ever. We're never, ever going to make it. And guess what? Didn't happen. The mines could very well operate with way less people on site, with different types of communications, with different type of decision levels. So there is a whole organizational innovation ongoing And I really think that the mining industry was forced to become much leaner from an organizational point of view, and it's never ever going to go back to what it was because it's not necessary. The mining productivity, and I think if you saw that newspaper in Chile, I think it was last Sunday, the Mercurio thought about that the productivity in Chile has been higher than ever before. Well, that's sort of concerning, right? We all have to stay at home and work from home in order to get the productivity up, but it is an aspect that is relevant. So I would mention the organizational innovation beyond what's more technical. Alejandra, you're muted in case you're talking to me.
Thank you. Jacobia Solomon asks, how would you capture the value of innovation in mining to increase acceptance?
How would I value the innovation in mining?
I'm going to send
yeah. I'm just scrolling down to make sure. How would you capture the value of innovation in mining to increase acceptance? Oh, well, that is a very good question. Yes. Well, innovation goes beyond. I am an engineer myself, and I work in digital transformation and technological innovation. But again, innovation goes way beyond the technological part. There is a lot of innovation in the way we manage social responsibility, in the way we manage safety, in the way the industry manages stakeholder engagement. So there is a major amount of value, a very significant amount of value in innovation to increase acceptance. I can give one specific example, but then that is a technical example, but it is a very illustrative one. Andacollo has a nice mining operation. It's operated by Teck in close to La Serena, and that mining operation, because it's so close to a village, agreed with the communities that they would only do their blasting, which is a noisy happening, to put it that way, and it of course produces a certain amount of dust. They would only do it at middays and only at working days. At Andacollo, they cannot blast on Saturdays and Sundays and on public holidays. And they do it only at middays, but only if the wind blows into the right direction. If the wind would blow towards the village, then the blasting cannot be done. Now, how do you convince the community that actually the wind is blowing in the right direction? So they have this big balloon, literally, that can you see from anywhere in the village. It's a small village, of course, that indicates where the wind is coming from. So, and everybody agrees that that balloon, you cannot really manipulate it. So the whole village can see that the climatological conditions are the right ones to go ahead with the blasting. And it's a nice example of technical and social innovation on how you can engage the communities and basically assure the communities that the conditions are met to make sure that what you're doing is not going to have an impact. And there are many more. This is just a very specific one, but there is a lot of value in that type of innovation. And it's critical to increase acceptance, definitely. Good question.
I think that was the last question. Ronke, thank you very much for your talk. It was really interesting. You're my idol. Really, I'm a woman, so I'm very proud of you.
I did my MBA at the University of Chile.
No, you have a very nice background, so congratulations. And thank you very much for your help and to give all your knowledge. Can we share with the students your presentation?
Yes, no problem at all. Please go ahead. Make sure it's a PDF version. At the last slide, where I say thank you, my email address is there. So please reach out to me if I can help you with any specific aspects or questions. I'm happy to follow up. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn as well, so just put Romke Chile and you will find me. There are not that many Romkes in Chile. And I will be happy to follow up with those who are interested after this specific session.
Thank you very much. Thank you everyone for attending this talk and all the talks during the week. I expect that you enjoyed all our efforts to show you how is Chile with our graduates. So have a nice weekend. Thank you very much.
Are we still in the audience live, or are it just us now?
No, yes, we're still in the audience.
We're still in the audience. Okay, I will have to behave for another 5 minutes. How many people were there, Alejandra? Did you have an overview?
Arrived 38 people.
Okay, good. Okay.
See. And maybe tomorrow or next week, Nicole will send you the average of people that attend your talk and the evaluation.
Okay, good. Oh, wow, I will be evaluated. You didn't tell me that.
See. When they close WebEx event, they receive immediately a small evaluation.
Okay, good. Okay. Well, that's good. I usually don't get that. It's very important, I think.
Ale, Romke?
See?
Yes.
Sorry, I'm going to close now with some videos.
Okay, good. Thank you very much.
Good night.
Copié el chat y I'm going to send you the chat, the things that the people do. Okay?
Wonderful. Thanks a lot, Alejandra.
Gracias, Romke. A million. You're the best. Really. No, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.